You're not getting any younger, so
start today. Whatever you're passionate about, that thing you're thinking about right now that you thought about this whole episode, do that today. Take the first steps, whatever those may be.
Hey you! Yes, you! Welcome to the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast. A podcast for people who want to disrupt their lives for a good reason, to make it count. I'm your host, Jen Glantz, and every week I'll drop a new episode with stories from real people just like you, who woke up one morning and decided to make big changes, starting with small things. We'll cover topics like entrepreneurship, love, failure, and self-care. Hey, you're not getting any younger, so let's make this an adventure. Ready? Hey, any youngers. Okay, so I think one thing that's really important to remember and recognize is that we all have something that we're struggling with that we don't tell anyone about. Like, there's that thing that keeps us up at night, that thing we think about during lunch, that thing that really rattles our stomach throughout the day that we keep silent. We don't tell anyone that we're struggling with, and it's okay. Like, I think it's really okay that if you are struggling with something, that you don't always have to vocalize it to everyone, and sometimes you need to process it on your own before you share it with anybody else. But then you get to the point when you're like, I am done struggling alone. And you find that person, maybe it's that close friend of yours or that family member, or maybe you go to a professional and you sit there and you rattle off every single thing you're going through. And it feels like you just took this giant weight off of your shoulders, but more than that, it reminds you that you're not alone, because that person that you just told usually 9 out of 10 times will look at you and say, oh my God, me too. Or, I know somebody who's also struggling with this. Or, hey, that's okay. You're not the weirdest person in the world, and you're not alone, and you're not the first person or the last person to go through this. I promise you, I'm 30 years old. I've lived quite the life, and I can honestly say that I really believe any problem we're experiencing, no matter how complex it is, we're not the first ones to go through it. And there's always something worse that people have experienced too. Not that you should be comparing and contrasting, but you should just know that whatever you're suffering through, you're not the only one. And there's always, always, always something that you can do to get help, to get better, to get past this. That's exactly what the show is about today. On the show today, we have Jaclyn DiGregorio, a graduate of Georgetown University and the founder of Cuspit, a wellness community that encourages young women to cultivate a healthy relationship with food and their bodies. Jaclyn is the best-selling author of The Cusp Method and is a frequent speaker on college campuses. I am so excited to have her on her show. She was giving such great advice on the interview that I was secretly tearing up. Even though she is young, she is bright, she is brilliant, and I think she's going to rock your world on this episode. So thank you all for listening. And as always, if you love what you hear, please, please, please make sure you subscribe and review on iTunes. Also, come hang out with us in the Secret You're Not Getting Any Younger Facebook group. It's officially been active and alive for a year. We have almost 1,500 members inside of there. I really hope to see you there soon. This week's episode is sponsored by jenglantz.com, where you can find a handful of my coaching services on sale for Black Friday and Cyber Monday this week only. Have you ever wanted to quit your job, start a business, or figure out how to strategize your life and your to-do list? Visit jenglantz.com and click on the Black Friday tab. There's something big waiting for you. We are smack down in the middle of holiday season, and it's a season where it's really food heavy. Like, people are eating mashed potatoes and pies and jelly donuts for those of us celebrating Hanukkah. It's a time I feel like people start to feel guilty about what they're eating. How can you recommend to people to stop stressing about what's on their plate and start being more present about where they are during this holiday season?
That is such an awesome question, and I can really relate to the struggle, because I remember when I was struggling with my eating disorder, I used to overeat on holidays and occasions where there were all these guilt-filled foods, and then I would feel awful about myself. And because of that, I would restrict my food intake. And this is how I developed an eating disorder. So I definitely want to encourage people to let go of the idea of foods as being good and bad, and instead look at all foods as energy, because that's what they are. A calorie is a unit of energy. And focus on spending your time on caring about the relationships and the people that are in front of you rather than obsessing over what you're eating. If you're struggling with letting go of that guilt, really the only way to do it is to allow yourself unconditional food freedom. It's a really long process and it's a journey that doesn't happen overnight. But I encourage you to read more about a concept called intuitive eating if this is something you're struggling with, or reach out to me. I would love to help.
I love that because I'll be honest, I've been traveling a lot, celebrating the holidays. I've had like a series of like 5 days straight of just bagels, just carbs, and I'm feeling like so stressed out about this. So, can you tell me a little bit more about what that is and how a person like me can stop feeling so guilty about having a little bit of fun with their food?
Absolutely. So, intuitive eating is a super interesting concept. It really goes back to these innate instincts we were born with to eat when we were hungry and stop when we're full and eat foods we like. Just like a baby, if you put, peas in front of them and they don't like peas, they'll push them away. But if they love the carrots, they'll eat so many carrots that their nose will turn orange. That's how humans were born. And that's this instinct that somewhere along the way, a lot of us have lost due to diet culture pushing certain messages like, oh, carbs are bad for you. But when you start to study the science of nutrition, you learn that carbs are what fuels your brain and your central nervous system and your red blood cells. And they're so important to our bodies. But we sort of build up these rules in our head about what foods are good and what foods are bad. And so we lose this ability to listen to our hunger and fullness cues. And instead we think, what should I be eating? How much should I be eating? As opposed to just what sounds good to me right now. So the basics of intuitive eating go back to starting with first, eliminating any food rules. Allow yourself to eat anything that you like, anything that sounds pleasing to you. Second, try to eat when you're hungry. It means don't wait until you're absolutely ravenous because you're more likely to overeat when you go into a meal so hungry. But don't eat just to eat because that's an emotional eating thing. And there's nothing wrong with emotional eating. It's a part of us being human beings. And I always say I'm glad that we're not robots and that we do have emotions. We're very fortunate to have them because they make life amazing. But, you want to focus on eating when you're hungry because food is fuel, food is energy. And then the harder part becomes stopping when you're full. And the reason that people have trouble stopping when they're full is most often because they place food on this pedestal, they feel food guilt, and they restrict somewhere else in their life. So if you allow yourself the freedom to eat the donut when you want one, it doesn't feel so appealing. If you see pie on Thanksgiving, but you're allowed to eat pie any day of the year, you don't want to eat 4 slices. You might eat half a slice and feel satisfied. So it's a really interesting concept, but it really goes back to that. And then once you're able to build up this healthy relationship with food where you're allowed to eat foods you like, you listen to your hunger and fullness cues, then there's this concept called gentle nutrition where you can incorporate eating nutrient-dense foods because they make your body feel good, because they give you energy, not because you're trying to change the way you look. And not that there's anything wrong with trying to lose weight. It's a normal thing that people feel, and I get it because my eating disorder actually gained about 30 pounds through constantly binge eating. And so, there's nothing wrong with you if you feel that way, but the problem is that when you feel externally motivated, you lose confidence in yourself, and your decisions aren't for health, they're for appearance. And that scrapes away a lot of the, nutritional value of what you're eating, because if you're only eating for appearance, you're going to be limiting your calories. You're not going to be getting all the nutrients your body needs, etc. So once you're able to really feel comfortable in your own skin, which is something that takes years to cultivate, adding in that gentle nutrition and making decisions from a perspective of, both these options sound really good, but this one has a heck of a lot more nutrients in it, so I'm going to go with that one, is really how you can achieve greater health and confidence in your own skin without having those nagging feelings of guilt about every food decision you make.
Okay, I'm sitting here with a giant smile on my face because I feel like you just said something that not a lot of people say when it comes to food, which is allow yourself to have that donut, to have that piece of pie. Because if you restrict it and then you wait for that one time of year, you're going to binge and you're going to eat 16 apple pies in one sitting. So I love that. And is it true? Like, do you feel like this is all just sort of a mindset shift kind of thing, like thinking before you eat? Because it sounds like you're saying that. And I really think that's very unique perspective.
Yes, it is. The way I sort of describe it is almost rewiring your brain. Like, I used to have these almost like mental connections where, certain foods were off limits. And when they were in front of me, I couldn't help myself.
Yes.
So once I shifted my mindset to that, I'm allowed to have them. And there was definitely a period, I will like to mention this disclaimer, and everyone experiences this, where when they're, sort of allowed for the first time, you will overeat. You will probably binge on them because you've restricted yourself for so long. So your brain sort of has to believe you. It has to say, look, Jaclyn, I really believe you that you are allowed to have the pie whenever you want it. And once your brain gets to that point, it's just like you don't really want it. And you taste the pie and you're like, it's not that good. I don't think I ever thought it was the best thing ever. And don't get me wrong, I still eat pie whenever I want it. But it's just funny because it really is internal. So this same food decision can have totally different mindsets that lead to it and totally different consequences. And so it's really that internal decision of, I want to eat this, for example, whole wheat bread because it gives me energy and it makes me feel good, not because I'm trying to lose 5 pounds. And I want to eat this pie, not because I'm only allowed to have it once a year, but because it's really yummy and my aunt made it and I only see her once a year. And so I'm going to enjoy every bite of this one slice as opposed to these 6 slices. So it's really interesting, but I definitely agree. It's all mental. It's a mindset. And once you make that shift, it's so freeing.
I love it. I feel like that right now because I've had a bagel every single day for the last 2 weeks. And then this morning I woke up and I was like, if I see a bagel, I'm going to scream. I don't want one. I don't crave one. I would rather have fruit. I feel like I got to that point where I'm like, I cannot have any more carbs because I'm so carved out because I allowed myself to indulge. So I like this. I'm going to follow your advice for sure. I want to start also by talking about your journey at Georgetown when you were in college. What was college like for you? What was that first couple of years like for you?
College was an amazing experience for me. I made a lot of great friends and I learned so much. Georgetown was very challenging and it really pushed me to my limits to think a different way and to, just sort of really mature as a person and as a learner. But there were also a lot of tough times for me, really surrounding my eating disorder. When I got to freshman year, I wanted to fit in like everyone else. And I really didn't have any body insecurities. But most of the talk, especially in the dining hall, was around, what foods were healthy, what foods were unhealthy. What breakfast cereals had too much sugar in them and we shouldn't eat them. And so I sort of just fell into this conversation as a way to make friends and a way to fit in as an 18-year-old going from a small town. And I didn't know another soul on that campus. And this sort of spiraled into this cycle of restrict, binge. And that's when I developed binge eating disorder. And so though I still had a really great experience, my first 2 years were tough because I was struggling with my eating disorder. No one really knew and no one really noticed because with binge eating disorder especially, a lot of people tend to gain weight. And so others around you just think, oh, that's sort of the freshman 15. And they don't realize that, no, I have a really awful relationship with food and it controls everything I do and it makes me feel depressed and anxious. So once I was able to realize, number one, that this is a problem, and I remember the moment that I felt that way, I was sitting in my room at home. It was right before I went back for my sophomore year, and I had turned down plans with my best friends to go to Applebee's for late night appetizers because I knew that if I went, I would either restrict myself and binge later or binge because there were all these options on the menu. And both of those cases were my eating disorder acting for me. And they weren't who I was as a person. They weren't allowing me to enjoy my time with the people I loved the most in my life. And so when I realized that was a problem, I decided to take action. I saw my dietitian on campus. She was amazing. She introduced me to intuitive eating. And I want to paint a realistic picture. It took me about a year, my whole sophomore year, I guess 9 months, to really recover. So I was about, struggling for a year, and then I would say struggling for another year through recovery until I really was able to rewire my brain and have a normal relationship with food, and not look at it as something that sort of controlled all my actions. And the really big thing that was for me, the change wasn't even in my eating habits, but it was in my confidence. And so that's why with Cuspit, confidence is like the number one thing, because I realized that when women struggle with their body image and with their relationship with food, it makes them feel like they're not good enough, not just in their appearance, but in all areas of their life. And I remember, as a girl who would sit front row in every class, I stopped raising my hand in class because I didn't want to say something stupid. And so that lack of confidence that I had in myself, that really made my first 2 years challenging. But when I was able to cultivate that and build it, and there's all kinds of ways I actively actually have focused on building my confidence and continue to do this to this day. But through those different ways, I was able to really build the life of my dreams. And my second 2 years they were a dream. I mean, I got to explore entrepreneurial pursuits, which, have really panned out for me. I got to just try new things and not be afraid, take risks, and really be myself and surround myself with people who were right for me. And I think that's something a lot of, college students face. It's challenging to make new friends and to find the right friends and surround yourself with the right people. And I'm really fortunate that I had such a great group of friends. And so I think that my college experience was definitely a positive one, and I couldn't speak more highly about Georgetown. But I think that struggling with eating issues and confidence and body image issues can make it something that is really challenging and makes you wonder, I thought college was supposed to be the best 4 years of your life. So if anyone's out there and they're in college and they feel like they're struggling, just know that it does get better. And working on building your confidence is lifelong. It's not just going to make your college years better, but it's going to make you live a more fulfilled life.
Wow. So much to ask you about this, including the fact that you are so open and honest about talking about this. I know there's a lot of people out there who are struggling with stuff, and whether that's an eating disorder or an anxiety disorder or just anything, I know that a lot of people are sitting there working overtime to hide it, to not talk about it, to not admit it, to not be honest about it. So what advice do you have for those people who are sitting there hiding it, keeping it a secret? How can they also get the help that they need? Because I know that the first step and the hardest step is admitting that you have something like this going on. So what advice do you have for them?
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought this up, because it actually took me a really long time to admit it. I mean, my friends and my parents knew that I was going to see a dietitian, but nobody ever called it an eating disorder. And especially it's interesting with binge eating disorder specifically, because it only became recognized as an official eating disorder in 2014, which was just about a year after, or around the same time actually that I was struggling. So, it was even hard to be diagnosed with that when it wasn't even considered a real eating disorder. So for me, I actually I didn't hide it. I was open about the fact that I was having some problems.
Yep.
But I never called it an eating disorder. And when I sort of started my business and was getting more into it, and people were asking me about my story, there was no way to explain it without just saying it. So I remember the first time I said it, and it was really hard. And a couple of months ago, I was interviewed for, a story from my local paper here in Philly. And, the headline was, a resident recovered from an eating disorder and started this business. And, I thought everyone was going to think it was like the craziest thing ever, because it said my eating disorder in a headline, but nobody even flinched. So I feel like everyone really knew, but I couldn't say it for a really long time. And so if you're struggling with that and, accepting that you're struggling with something, whatever it is, just know that it's normal and there's nothing wrong with you. The fact that it's hard to say it and talk about it. It's taken me a really long time to get to this point where I'm so open about it. And I really do it because I want to help other people. So that's one way that might help motivate you. The challenge is that you can change the lives of other people struggling. And the more that we talk about the things that we struggle with, the more that we can help others and make it, less taboo, or make it feel like, oh, there's something so seriously wrong with you. This is something that so many people struggle with, different areas of their mental health. And quite frankly, it's almost normal. And so the more we talk about and the more we normalize it, the more we can help others. So that was one thing that motivated me. I would say the first step is talking to someone that's really close to you and that you can trust and that loves you unconditionally. For me, that was my mom. And, she helped me guide me in the right direction because she wanted me to be happy. And the people that love you, they want what's best for you. So I think that's a really good first step. And then also seeking professional help. I know it might be hard. I know it might be scary, but there's a lot of resources out there that are even affordable. For example, specifically for college students, my dietitian was free on my campus. I didn't pay a penny because I had a meal plan. And so, I took advantage of a free resource. I didn't have to invest any time or money. And not every resource is free. Of course, not every insurance is going to cover, maybe the therapy that you need. But, look and see what is available to me without even investing money and start there. There's online tests, for eating disorders. Do you have an eating disorder on the NEDA website? I'm sure there are tests like that for anxiety. And of course, an online test cannot diagnose you, but it can guide you in the right direction to say, maybe it's time to seek out professional help. So just know that it's okay if you feel that way, but talking to someone you love, getting professional help, and then when you're okay with it, speaking out about it because it really can help others. And it's really empowering to know that you're using what has challenged you to your very core to help others who need it the most.
Wow, I love it. And I think it's so important for people to remember they're not alone. I know when you're struggling with something so big, you feel like you're the weirdest person in the world, you're the abnormal one in the room, but the second you tell somebody, listen, I have this going on with me, usually they say, oh my God, I have something similar, or I know somebody similar, or I heard this before. I mean, I think things start to get normalized the more we talk them out loud. So I completely agree with you. And I think, you used your struggles to come up with something incredible. So tell us a little bit more about Cuspit. When did you start it? Why did you start it? And what motivated you to start this during college?
Yeah. So, it was kind of a fun journey. I previously had thought that, my major was marketing. And so I wanted to work for a big company and do marketing. And I experimented with that through a couple internships. And I quickly realized that, corporate America wasn't for me. I was very entrepreneurial minded. Ever since I was a kid, I always said I wanted to start a business. I just didn't know when or what it was going to be. And around the same time, I noticed that a lot of the girls around me were asking me questions. I was opening up about my eating disorder. They were interested in, just how much they had seen me change as a person, my happiness, my confidence, my well-being, the way I took care of myself and really loved myself. And it was interesting to me to see how much they struggled with it and how much they were desperate to know what I did, because I realized, wow, this is a huge problem. So I started doing some research into eating disorders. And, there's not a lot of research on specifically confidence in college. But just the fact that there's 32% of college women who have an active eating disorder, I mean, that's almost 1 in 3. Wow. And that doesn't account for, disordered eating habits or just the culture on campuses around food and body image and exercise. And so I realized, okay, this is a problem. I need to do something about it. So I signed up for an entrepreneurship class. That was sort of my first step. And I was really blessed to have this amazing opportunity through my class to write a book. So I wanted to explore this concept and really do a lot of interviews from everything from the students themselves to the experts and figure out this problem. And so that's what I did. And the Cuss Method was my book. It became an Amazon bestseller when I launched it. And I was able to raise $20,000 on Kickstarter all in the spring of my senior year. So that was sort of, the big start of it. And I didn't really know exactly where it was going to go or what I wanted to do. But I had this mission to help, young women, but especially in college, since that's where my struggle hit me and I really saw it a lot, be more confident, have a healthier relationship with food in their body, be able to manage their well-being and take care of themselves and feel good in their own skin, because those habits were so important to me. To see the change I made from my sophomore year to my junior year, the fact that I even had the confidence in myself to say, hey, I'm going to start a business. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to set this crazy endeavor of $20,000 when, I'm from a very middle class family. It's not like I could just have someone donate $20K. It took blood, sweat, and tears to raise that money. So to set those really high goals, I needed to have confidence in myself. And I realized through this process that that's what I wanted these other girls to have. I wanted them to be able to say, hey, I want to go to law school, or, I want to write a book, or, I want to start this nonprofit, whatever it is that they're passionate about, to be able to have the confidence in themselves to do it. And I know that directly relates to your relationship with food in your body. So that's kind of where my mission started with Cuspit. And I wanted to create tools to be able to make it easily accessible and something that, I could have knowledge and resources to help these women. So I started with an app because I thought, apps are technology, they're easy, they're affordable for people to download. And so that's been a really fun process over the last about year and a half. And we're almost launching our second version after beta testing. And so the app is a purpose of sort of teaching intuitive eating and helping people apply it in real life through a food journal. So you're able to write down what you've eaten, how hungry you are before you ate, how full you felt after, any emotions that you had going on. So really just to incorporate that mindfulness aspect of eating and understanding those hunger and fullness cues. And then I also built an e-course, which we're launching in January. So I'm really excited about that. And I speak at colleges to just share my story and raise awareness. Obviously, and I promote my book, and I'm always looking for, new tools to add to that toolbox. So I'm really excited about where we're going and how far we've come so far. And it's been really awesome. And I'm so happy that I started it in college. And one piece of advice that I have to anyone who's in college and is thinking about starting a business, if you're really passionate about, it's a great time to start. Everyone is willing to help a college student. When you contact them and you say, I'm a college student, I'm an entrepreneur, I need help with this legal thing or, this marketing plan, especially at your school. There's lots of entrepreneurship resources at most colleges, someone that the business school can connect you with. And so that really helped me get the base of a business plan and of funding together to really take that leap. But I will give a disclaimer that it's really hard and it takes away from your social life and your college experience a little bit. For me, I felt really mature for my age. And I was sort of been there, done that for a lot of the college things. And I was okay with spending a Friday or Saturday night in my house working on my business. And that was right for me, but it's not right for everyone. So keep that in mind. But for me, I was really happy I started in college because I felt like it allowed me to get a head start on sort of everyone else who might be starting a business, once they graduate. I sort of graduated and I knew exactly what I was doing. I was already on my way. And so that gave me confidence even to continue with my venture because as you know, as an entrepreneur, you don't get those wins like you do in school anymore. So you have to have a lot of confidence in yourself and around these small milestones in order to keep you going and keep you passionate every day.
You want to know what I think is the coolest thing about you? Like when I was researching you, I'm like, this person, I want to be her best friend because I am so anti-excuses. And you started a business in college, but most people are thinking about anything but that. You started it with no money, which is another reason why people make excuses to start businesses. And you started it with no experience either. So you are a no excuse, I'm going to do this thing. And I think that is so incredibly amazing. I think it's so great that you started a business from complete scratch and have grown it so incredibly much. But I have to ask you, this idea of being an entrepreneur, I'm sure you've met a lot of people who want to be an entrepreneur, but they don't know where to start. They don't do much. The idea is sort of being glorified a little bit. Do you feel like that term is sort of getting a little bit messy in terms of what it means?
I do. I feel like it's especially glorified. And I had that view of it. I grew up watching Shark Tank.
Yep.
Seeing, wow, I'm going to be on Shark Tank one day, mom and dad. And, that's exciting. And I'm glad that it promotes people to follow their dreams. I think that's amazing. But I think I was in for a rude awakening. It doesn't happen overnight. I'm 2 years in and I feel like I'm just getting started. And, there were a lot of tough times and there still are, and I have many to come. Specifically, I think that entrepreneurship is very lonely. And this is something I like to, when I talk to an entrepreneurship class or a group of young entrepreneurs, I like to tell them about this experience because I want them to understand it so that they can prepare themselves for this and maybe do something about it because it hit me really hard. I'm a super social, outgoing person. That's why I wanted to work in a big office with lots of people. So, starting with no money, I don't have an office. I was in my room, in my house, in my dorm. And I spent a lot of time alone. And after a while, days and days and days, weeks, months, years at this point, I started to really get down. So I was able to find ways to engage in local entrepreneurship communities, get involved with, different nonprofit organizations in the area, find places where I could work out of that involved other local entrepreneurs like co-working spaces. And I was able to get myself sort of out of that lull, sort of a little bit of, I would say, entrepreneurial depression that I felt at one point. And so I think that's really important. And I think because entrepreneurship is so glorified, people aren't aware of the struggles and the challenges you might face. And I also think that a lot of people call themselves an entrepreneur and they're really not. And it sort of bothers me as an entrepreneur because I feel like it discredits the people who are actually doing it. It doesn't mean you have to be an entrepreneur full time. It's awesome for the people who, start a side hustle and grow entrepreneurship on the side. I think that's really great. And that can actually probably combat a lot of the loneliness I felt. But I think people who call themselves an entrepreneur that aren't actually doing anything, if you're listening and that's how you feel you are right now, I encourage you to get started, to do something. It doesn't have to be a big, crazy product idea or an app that you have to spend thousands of dollars on, but just start somewhere. And, if you're going to call yourself an entrepreneur, have a goal to really make a difference in people's lives and change the world, even if it's in a small way. Because we don't want entrepreneurship to be a really diluted title that everyone says there are and it means nothing anymore. We want it to be something that's really valuable in society because I think entrepreneurs are the people who really move society forward. They're the change makers in the world. And so we want to respect that for the people who are doing those things.
Amen to that. So you've been out of college for a year. You decided, you know what? I'm not going to take an entry-level job. Instead, I'm going to pursue my business. That must have been an insanely tough choice to make. What have you learned so far in this post-grad first year of working for your own business?
The number one thing I would say I learned is that the key to success is failure. So I didn't even mention most of my failures up until this point, but my idea originally started through my book that I wanted to make this plate that would help women who are struggling with binge eating see, these are healthy portion sizes. This is sort of what a normal person eats. And this is how you can make a balanced meal so that you can feel, confident about what you're eating, that it's giving your body energy. And so this was my original sort of start of Cuspit. And it's funny because, it has nothing to do with really what I'm doing now. But the fact of the matter is that I actually spent $10,000 on this inventory and it was sort of a total failure. And the best thing about it was that it helped me learn what the challenges actually were that women were facing so that I could write my book, so that I could make content for my app and my online course. So it was the most valuable thing that ever happened to me. And it was the best $10,000 I ever spent. But at the time, it was heartbreaking. And so I think that failure and being able to pivot as an entrepreneur and learn from your failures and listen to your customers is absolutely critical. And if you don't take those big risks and allow yourself to fail, allow yourself to spend money, allow yourself to jump off that cliff, you'll never be successful. So the big thing for me is not being afraid. It's jumping into things. It's making changes quickly. And it's giving myself permission to fail because by doing that, I'm giving myself permission to succeed.
I love it. And I failures are what makes us succeed, not our successes. And I think the more times you fail, the more times you learn exactly where you need to pivot and what you need to do. And with failure comes those moments where you feel, wow, I'm truly making a difference. I just need to switch how I'm going to do that. What would you say is the most rewarding part of being an entrepreneur so far?
My favorite thing that I do is speaking to students. Because when I get on that stage and I share my story, sort of like we talked about with talking about mental health and any struggles you might have, I can see in the eyes of these women in the audience that their lives are changed. I mean, and the messages I get afterwards and being able to talk to them and them to share with me, wow, I never even thought about it that way. I can't even believe that, my struggle is so similar to yours and that I'm not alone. It's just so incredibly rewarding. And so, if you have the opportunity to share your story, whatever it is with the world, please do it, because it really does change people's lives and being able to just see it in their eyes. Like it's a one-way conversation and I can see the way they look at me. This is having an impact. And to be able to change other people's lives is, what I think we were born to do as human beings. So if you ever have that opportunity to share your story, please do it because it is so rewarding as an entrepreneur.
Oh, you are amazing. Jaclyn, I have one more final question for you. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Please fill in the blank. You're not getting any younger, so
start today. Whatever you're passionate about, that thing you're thinking about right now that you thought about this whole episode, do that today. Take the first steps, whatever those may be.
Jaclyn, you are incredible. You said that you watch Shark Tank a ton. I have a feeling inside of my gut that one day I'm not only going to see you on the show, but you're going to be a judge on the show. So please remember me when you're famous and you are a successful entrepreneur, even more so than today, because I think your future is going to be amazing. Thank you so much again for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, Jen. I sure hope that comes true someday.
Please, before you go real fast, tell our listeners where they can find out more about you, your business, your book, and all of your wonderful programs.
Awesome. So I would love your support. You can follow me on Instagram. It's at cusp, CUSP.IT. My website is cuspit.com. I'm Cuspit on Facebook. My book's on Amazon. It's called The Cusp Method. And you can feel free to email me. I have my contact info on my website, and I would love to chat more with any of you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jaclyn. Thank you again for being on the show.
Thanks again for having me.
Hey, you. Thank you for listening to the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast. There are hundreds of thousands of pods out there, so thank you for listening to this one. You can find the show notes for this week's episode up on our website, anyyounger.com. Subscribe, rate, and review the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast on iTunes so that other ears around the world can listen too. Oh, and join our secret You're Not Getting Any Younger Facebook group, where over 1,000 people are talking about how to disrupt their lives, for good reason, to make it count. Until next week, all my love, Jen Glantz.